All right, welcome back to Bard and Barrel, where we are taking apart everything for you dungeon masters. This is our 7-part series on knowing your players as a DM and recognizing the things that make them tick and being able to engage them in your games and make better campaigns and better adventures for not only yourself, but for your players as well. So today we are on number 5. We're talking about optimizing. This is Riley's for sure favorite of all 5. And I personally enjoyed it a little bit as well, but maybe not so much as him. I don't have 400 or 500 characters logged in my database, but this guy does. So I'm going to lean on a lot of his inspiration today from my side. I honestly would hit random every time on my characters if I could. Generally, what we run a lot of our stuff out of the Dungeon Master's Guide, the DMG, the Holy DMG is what we like to call them. And this is right here on page 6. It's going to outline everything that we have in these 7 videos. So if you want a sneak peek, flip open page 6 on the DMG. We're going to be under optimizing. Here's who our optimizers are. Players who enjoy optimizing their characters' capabilities like to fine-tune their characters for peak combat performance by gaining levels, new features, and magic items. They welcome any opportunity to demonstrate their character's superiority.
I love this section. I definitely am 100% an optimizer when it comes to the definition that's found here in the DMG. I like to fill a role as a character. I not necessarily optimize to be the best player at the table. I don't aspire to do that. I aspire to become the player that the party needs to round out the party's, strategy. If they need a healer, I'm gonna be the best healer. If they need a tank, I'm gonna be the best tank, kind of a thing.
Mind you, when I am prepping a campaign and getting everybody's characters set up, Riley has already got 15 characters made, and then he will make 10 more after everyone's chosen who they want to be, just so he can fill the specific niche little hole that he wants to and make everybody depend on him. That's how much of an optimizer he is.
I've got players or characters I want to play, and then if they end up fitting the role that the party needs, I end up playing them. But if not, then yeah, I got to make new ones. Of course, naturally. It doesn't always have to be this way, though. You don't have to be the person that makes 400 characters, and spends way too much time like I do building characters. But you could optimize the way that you play just at the table rather than, maybe you don't have the most optimized character. You haven't spent a ton of time on that, but the way that you play, you're very strategic. You like to make the best of your time. You kind of get right to the point, things like that. You optimize the way that you play, and that can change the dynamic of the table as well.
That's definitely true. And I think that is an important point we look over a lot of times is, you're not only, as an optimizer, you're not only the guy who's, min-maxing every character you have, spending 4 or 5 hours looking through spells, just ensuring that you have every possible situation covered. You could very well just be a very strategic player and you want to optimize every opportunity that you have, whether that be, have we scoured every single crevice of this dungeon to find out if there's any more loot laying around? I want to make sure that I don't have to go through a whole nother dungeon to get more loot. I got to optimize, make sure everything is taken care of, right? They're not going to waste a whole lot of time. They're going to optimize their time at the table, try to make sure that everything that they can accomplish can get done.
Yeah, and a lot of times you'll find out, DMs, that these are your players that will bring stuff to the table that will frighten you, that will catch you off guard most of the time at what you didn't even think possible that characters were capable of. They end up knowing the other players' characters really well and can blend well with them, making their abilities better. And so all in all, it can raise the power level of your table by quite a bit if you're not prepared for it. A great way to engage these players, our first point as we get into here, engage players who like optimization by ensuring steady access to new abilities and spells.
A lot of times as DMs, it's kind of feast or famine. is what I've seen. You're either a DM that's fairly stingy. I would consider myself pretty stingy. I don't hand a lot of stuff out to my players. I make them work really hard and get very close to death, right? You should find a good balance as a DM because obviously your players like loot. They want new abilities, they want new items, new weapons, whatever it may be. And you should find a way to roll those out in a steady manner. You are just consistently just right at the right times after they've worked through plenty of your adventures, whatever it may be. You can go ahead and reward them.
Yeah, there's another hand of that of being way too generous with magic items, which I find myself doing as a dungeon master. They complete an objective, and I have a magic item for every character at the table. Like, that's just, it makes it so that you overpower your characters really fast, which is fine. But at the same time, I wouldn't recommend it because it makes it so that you have to do a lot more work to reward your players because you have to, one up your last reward. Whereas if you took those 5 or 4 magic items that you had, one for every player, and split it up between different objectives, that the barbarian finally gets his axe, the bard then gets a loot, or a set of armor or chainmail that he can wear finally that boosts his armor class, and it's no longer a measly 14. It allows them to feel steadily rewarded for the things that they're doing. Maybe not everyone gets something every single time, but someone gets something very pertinent at each turn. And it makes it feel more, like you stated, steady and consistent, and not like you're just throwing up magic items. Because I do feel like sometimes that is an issue with me as a DM, is my players end up with bags of holding of just dusty magic items because they have way too many. They can't attune to them all, and they got to pick and choose what they end up using, and they end up using the best ones anyway, so the other ones get left behind and rust and whatever. So
Riley's very generous. He is quite the kind DM where I'm like, handing here's a couple gold pieces. You can do better. You could be do better, be better. That's my take on DMing, right? Another interesting thing on the topic of rewarding your players. I've found that a lot of times when you do reward one of the players with a very good item, you might have some other players that are just kind of like a little bit, I don't know, perhaps jealous or feel a little left out, right? Found to mitigate that is actually to give a magic item to the group, right? You give a pearl that has, Riley just gave us in our campaign a couple pearls that have dimension door, charged with them, right? Things like that. You might have a ring that can reverse time up to a certain amount for, I don't know, 3 charges, and then it's done. It's over, right? Whatever it may be, you can find ways to be creative and even perhaps foreshadow or prepare your players in advance for things that they might need to have to accomplish certain goals within your campaign.
And even those single-use magic items can be really fun. If you're worried about overpowering your group with too many of these, it helps to do like a single use, those pearls of dimension door, single use, they can't quite cast 5th level spells yet, but they have the ability to cast this one time dimension door if they need to in an emergency situation. If your players are anything like our group, our players hoard all the usable single use items until the very last moment, and then at the end of the campaign we find out we have this this plethora of stuff they throw on the table. It's like, oh, I had this, I didn't use it. I had this, I didn't use it. But it gives them the option to have at least a single use, and it doesn't overpower them to the point where they have it every single time or every single combat, every single encounter. And I think that plays in a little bit to point number 2, using desired magic items as adventure hooks. These don't always have to be, like I said, overpowered items, but these can be similar to what Christian said, items that have backstory. Maybe it's a living weapon, something that maybe somebody could even multi-class into like warlock and have pack magic, because the sword is an entity of some kind. This adds a little bit of livelihood and almost a way for you to have an NPC with the party without having an actual character that you run. This is just a voice that they kind of carry around, and maybe have to do certain things to even be able to talk to it.
Yeah, honestly, magic items, weapons, whatever it may be, great hooks for adventures, right? Easy. It's an easy sell because the players are like, oh, yeah, I, that sounds amazing. I want one of those, right? If you've got a barbarian, you already know. You can kind of guess what he wants, right? As a barbarian, he's already chosen a certain path and he's looking for a big old mean axe that can just chop people in half. Or do we, lean more in on the cleave side of things where they can wipe out multiple enemies in single rounds and whatever it may be, right? Or something that can even boost like, his rage and you can play off of that. Like when you're raging, I don't know, a second axe appears in your hand and you just can go buck wild, kind of like a gunslinger if we're talking about Borderlands.
Yeah, and this can also be something that you tack onto an item later. Maybe they need a key to enter a dungeon, or to do something with that ends up being the axe that you gave the barbarian, or this weird fiddle that nobody uses. Nobody has a proficiency with this, and it's something that later you tack on that this one piece is pertinent to the story in this way, that you can kind of add in later. Obviously, so long as the party still has that item, it would kind of suck if they sold it and it's like, oh, now you got to go find it. I mean, that could be your plot hook.
That's a good. Yeah, that's not bad. Now you
That
got to
could
go
be your
track
plot hook.
down your
Yeah.
the market rat that you sold it to or whatever, and
Yeah, the underground
pawn it off
market.
too. You got to go get your pawn.
Yeah,
pawn
maybe it
shop
takes it to
guy.
the Underdark.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Knows.
So those are all kind of plot hooks that can take you either on side quests or make it part of the main campaign, pushing it forward.
All of this stuff that we've been talking about just barely. We're talking magic items, talking weapons, abilities. All of those things lead into this next point. You need to include encounters that let their character shine. Everything that you give them, everything you allow them to skill into and to choose path and to get better at, it's important for you as a DM to include encounters, situations where those players can shine. They want to show off to the rest of the group how good they are, right? They're a hero. That's what they do. And so if you've got a rogue in your group and you never give him a chance to sneak around and assassinate people and pick people off unknowingly, like in the dark, and just never be even seen and deal massive amounts of damage, that player's not going to have much fun. And he's going to feel very left out when the barbarian goes screaming head first in and just chops 15 people in half because the encounter was never set up to be able to handle, a stealth mission. It was always from the start, it was just a run and gun, take everybody out to begin with, right? You've got to be aware of those certain encounters and those your opportunities as a DM to allow your players to shine, allow your skilled players, your bards. They don't do much in combat, right? But you've got to allow them to shine too, as much as you can.
A lot of these encounters as well, along with the magic items, can be things and rewarded in similar ways as like feats. You don't always have to give these magic items, but feats can be a great way to, I guess, shore up weaknesses in characters or make them feel stronger. If you're like me, I'm not a huge fan of having to choose between an ASI, or ability score improvement, every 4 levels, and a feat. There's a lot of characters. I mean, this makes the fighter that much better, but it makes characters like paladins and whatnot sometimes kind of ability score hungry, and they aren't as good as some of the other players. And so this also allows characters to shine by giving them a feat, or even if you custom make your own one. There's a campaign that I ran that Christian's character, in fact, he effectively wanted Thor's hammer to be able to throw it and have it returned to him. And we made up a feat for it, and he kind of trained with someone with it. And over the course of a certain amount of time, it was over like 2 different levels. I custom made a feat that allowed him to use his hammer or whatever weapon it was that he was throwing to effectively, hit multiple targets at a disadvantage, per target, but then return to him afterwards. And it made him feel super important, and it didn't take up an additional feat. It didn't take up his ASI. It didn't, replace getting a level or any other magic item. All these things allow your characters to shine in their own moments. If you find that the barbarian, going back to your example, Christian, is constantly beating stuff down with some sort of bludgeoning weapon, quit putting rock golems in front of them and put something more squishy that maybe has resistance to bludgeoning but is vulnerable to piercing, making the rogue super, super important now to make sure that he gets a critical hit. And maybe the whole purpose of this is everyone's got to distract so that the rogue can get his opportunity to make that attack to make sure that the encounter goes the way that they need it to. There's a lot of different ways that you can make these points shine, but make sure that everyone is in the limelight. Everyone has a chance to stand in that and feel like a hero.
That's why we play D&D, right? We come to the table to do cool stuff. And that's what we want to do. And so allowing your players to fulfill that goal and allowing them to do cool stuff with their characters, right? They spend a lot of time. You can spend tons and tons of time at your table. And you invest so much time in for it to all, go to a mediocre performance it's wasteful, right? And so just ensure that your players have that opportunity to shine. You as a DM, you will have much more fun when you take yourself out of the situation and you make this the player's story. If you watch any of our other videos, we grill you on this all the time. Reward your players, let them shine, let them be the stars of the show. The only way you are going to be able to do that is to know your players' goals, right? Know their abilities and lay out tons and tons of opportunities for your players to do stuff.
Playing very well into our fourth point, providing quantifiable rewards like experience points for non-combat encounters.
If you've got someone at your table who they're not a role player, right? They've got like little bits and pieces maybe here and there, but they're not really ever fully engaged in your role playing. And you have a situation where, they step up to the plate. They're like, okay, I'm trying. I'm going to try my best to, I don't know, let's say they're trying to persuade someone to do something for the party. As you see them working and you can see them stretching themselves and pushing themselves to do a little more role play and get in an uncomfortable place for them, you should be rewarding that, right? Sometimes you might even reward it in a way that seems, I don't know, against the rules per se, right? They don't always have to roll for persuasion or deception or whatever the role may be for charisma. If they, as the player, do a good enough job at the table or have sufficiently met that quota, if you would, give it to them, reward them. They're going to be incentivized to do it again, right? It's all simple. It's the bell with the treat to the dogs, right? It's not to call your players dogs, but it's basically what we're doing here, right? They do something good, give them a reward. Do something good, give them a reward. Inside or outside of combat, you can give people XP. You can give people rewards. You can open doors for them that they don't have to roll any dice for because they did well enough in that situation.
The players are, example off the top of my head, if they're trying to interrogate someone and they have an extra prisoner that either knows the person they're trying to interrogate or has some sort of connection to them, and as part of the intimidation, they're acting this out. The wizard, kind of gangs up with the barbarian, and the barbarian ends up, fake chopping the hand off of the person that they have that's an associate, and the wizard minor illusions his arm falling off or whatever, even though it didn't actually happen. The fact that they're like acting this out and talking this through and both working on it, I wouldn't even have him roll intimidation at that point. The dude is just like, oh my gosh, no, like, okay, I'll talk, don't hurt him anymore, or don't come after me, like, once you're done with him. There's moments where that's a big enough reward in and of itself that they don't even have to roll. They don't have to worry about possibly failing even after they've role played the whole scenario out, or fail forward. Even if you give them a roll, if they fail, even if they critically fail, the information that you give them is still helpful, just not as helpful as it could have been. So the fact that they did so well, the role is just to determine how much information you give them, rather than whether or not they fail or succeed. Whether or not they know that, that's not, that's for you to know and for them to find out. This allows you to be a lot more creative as a DM. Finding new,
Absolutely.
cool ways to reward your players is always fun. And when you see their eyes light up because the reward is different than just XP or gold, and they thrive on that, and they're like, man, it made me feel like that was planned, and it makes you feel better because it's like, oh yes, I planned this.
Main takeaways here: reward, reward, reward. Right? That's what optimizers want. They want more stuff to work with to be able to place here and there and put things places. Well, that's it for us on Bard and Barrel today. Catch us the next time. We're going to be talking about problem solving. That's one of my favorite ones. Puzzles, puzzles, puzzles.
Yeah.
But until then, keep your games fun, and we'll catch you next time.